Human migration is the movement by people from one place to another with the intention to temporarily or permanently settle in the new location. Most human migration today is linked to employment. Migration can take place both across international as well as domestic borders. The United Nations estimates that there are approximately 232 million international migrants and 740 million internal or domestic migrants. These numbers increase every day. Being the largest receiver of labour in Asia, Malaysia is home to more than 3 million migrants, documented, irregular and undocumented. These individuals leave their families and countries in order to seek jobs in a variety of sectors. What challenges are faced? What are the perceptions of the public towards labour migration? How can policymakers support, execute and realise inclusive laws and regulations? Let us take a closer look at labour migration in Malaysia.
Mari itu Malaysia itu 8 tahun. 8 tahun saya mari itu saya kerja di Jampang. Ini mari itu 2 tahun, karena kerja 2 tahun, 4 tahun saya. Banyak tu kerja kalau itu saya jaga itu beli apa-apa, okey. Tu saya tahan dia apa saya tahan orang dan kerja Bangladesh dia semua tak lagi susah itu saya mari Bangladesh itu Malaysia. Ini mari kan saya sedikit uang sudah cukup kan saya ingat lagi baru bulan saya balik kampung. Tahun mari saya balik kampung. Uang Malaysia.
Migrant workers are predominantly employed in the construction and manufacturing sectors. This is particularly true for Malaysia. Owing to the high risk and dangerous nature of these jobs, safety and security are often the largest concerns.
So, ada ini ada safety punya cekap saya dengar. Okey. Itu tadi saya itu jaga kalau tak pakai ini saya langgar. Ini saya kena. Saya pakai safety dan tak pakai safety saya ada kali lewat apa terkena. Jam belakang nanti saya jatuh. Jaga saya sendiri lagi dengar itu lah. Saya sendiri jaga bagus. Bos baik saya mengikutlah. Bos tak baik mesti saya lari. Apa benar kerja benar saya mengikut sakit. So ini cari apa saya review.
Kini ke sana macam-macam wani mangla susah sih ini mari kita ngotiplah macam mana jadi kerja jadi saya sudah 8 tahun ini Malaysia sampai ada baik ini dunia sama semua ini saya kasih sekarang semua sini macam saya sudah lama sini saya baru oke tapi saya kerja sudah dulu dekat sana pun oke buat saya materi kita ada lama Bangladesh ada Malaysia orang ada itu susah ada sama itu segi jangan itu cara bayar gaji apa segi buat ada baik macam-macam lah. Orang buat susah memang susah, orang buat baik memang baik. Saya ada banyak kawan dari Bangladesh, ikut mari itu orang di Telangana. Ini orang baru-baru ada, lain tempat-tempat orang ada. Memang waktu saya mengerti, sini sudah waktu sudah jadi lain. Itu dulu Bangladesh mana ada kita ini macam kerja, sini mari mesti mau kerja. Apa kerja ada saya tak apa kerja saya sekolah di sekolah sudah berhenti saya tak naik sekolah kalau suruh masuk Malaysia main 20 tahun yang sudah kerja saya belum mari sini orang itu hantar orang kan agent kan macam-macam cerita tapi sini masuk mula-mula sudah layak sudah jauh Tuhan jaga kita, bukan saya jaga.
Yeah, in France there's a lot of people coming there to work, basically from Portugal, from Africa, from a lot of countries. And I think it's a good thing because they're not taking the work of anybody, they're extra work. So I think it's good for the country. It's just more people and more hands to work, to build a country, and I think it's very important as well culturally. So you can have like lots of different people coming from lots of different places in the world and mixing. I think that it's a really good thing because I'm from France and a part of France where there's a lot of people coming from everywhere. My family is from the Caribbean, so yeah, I enjoy seeing a country lots of different ethnies and culture, like Malaysia, for example. I really think that we are a part of the solution. We need to be more open-minded and try to live with the other culture and with other persons that are not necessarily like you and don't think the same. But you just have to be open-minded. This is a part of the solution.
I completely support migrant workers coming into our country, but the problem with that is that there are not enough law to secure them or provide the proper measure for them to be able to be the workers here legally. UNHCR have worked with our government to actually issue a card for these migrant workers pending the proper registration as to their status. But unfortunately, cases have shown that even with the UNHCR card, these migrant workers are still being harassed, are still being arrested by our immigration department. Why this happened, we really don't know, but it has been happening for years now. But I think lately the situation has improved a bit. The difference between migrant workers and expatriate. From the outside, you can tell that there is a difference. Expatriate come here and they give a higher skills in terms of work. Whereas for migrant workers, the type of skills that they bring are usually, most of the time, involve construction and labor. Whereas the expatriate, they give professional type of work like lawyers, consultant, engineers and all that. So from the outset, yes, there is a difference if you look that way. But if you look in terms of what they give to the country, it's the same thing. Labor. They provide essentially the same thing. They help with the labor with the country, and the country help them by paying them. What happened to the children of these undocumented migrant workers? Sometimes pending the process of their status as legal workers in Malaysia, along the way, because process takes about years for them to become a legal worker in Malaysia. So along the way, these migrant workers might have family and they have children. So if the status of this migrant worker is not completed, what happened to the status of their children? So these children become stateless and they cannot have access to education and also to medicine as well. So it kind of perpetuates the cycle for them.
Breaking the cycle of statelessness is a long, difficult, and sometimes impossible process, leaving stateless persons in vulnerable positions, open to abuse, violations, and exploitation.
The migrant workers are vulnerable because they do not enjoy the same protection as a normal citizen of a country. As a citizen of a country, you enjoy your rights under their law and under the constitution. Whereas a migrant worker, especially those that are undocumented and have not been processed their status yet, they don't have any protection at all. It's not just their status that makes them vulnerable is also because of the government and also the rest of the stakeholders involved in trying to control the movement of the migrant workers. At the end of the day, you need the support from the government in order to help elevate the migrant workers, because at the end of the day, if the government is the law, they pass the law to say that you have to do this and that. They are not helping at all. The government is not helping at all. The stakeholders, without the cooperation from the government, cannot do anything about helping out with the migrant workers.
Well, generally we are talking about open market or free trade. Trading barriers are being open, and essentially it is to have a ASEAN community, ASEAN market. But everybody forgets one important issue. When it comes to migration, there's so many barriers which are being imposed. So if you're talking about open market, why not open migration as well? And as it stands now, we talk about protection for migrant workers. There's barely any form of protection even in Malaysia. Undocumented migrant workers are even worse. And the numbers are rising. It becomes a huge industry for middlemen. Exploitation goes on, and so many horror stories that we hear among fellow ASEAN countries even, So this is one thing that I feel that nobody wants to talk about it. We talk about free trade, opening up our boundaries for trade, for business, for whatever it is, but nobody talks about what about migration of people. It will really assist countries if you allow people to come and go to elevate their lifestyle, their living. If they're poor, at least they can repatriate money and things like that.
Labour migration and migrant workers are so often synonymous with abuse, disempowerment, harm, and violations. Why is this the case, and what are some initiatives that can be taken in order to improve the current circumstances?
Because of laws and regulations which are so strict and tight, number one. Number two, the appointment of middlemen. Like in Malaysia, you have companies which are given the so-called the right to appoint or to recruit migrant workers. Then you have this other issue of enforcement officers, the police, the immigration. You have laws which are biased and implementation is so corrupt. Someone who walks around, a migrant worker has to carry his passport. It's a Caucasian, he walks free, nobody arrests him. Where if you go to the detention centers, there's so many Asians being held, Indonesian, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankan, Filipinos. It's so biased. I mean, we have so many undocumented migrant workers in Malaysia, and we are talking about bringing more workers. So surely there's some disconnect in terms of how we are handling the whole issue of migrant workers. Number one, do we need so many migrant workers? If we do need, shouldn't it be done in a better way with more protection for them? I think the initiative must come from the government. Initially, I think laws must be put in place for protection of migrant workers. There should be minimum wage, number one. They should get rid of a middleman, because for a worker to come to Malaysia, there's a huge amount of fees to be paid, which should all be reduced. Number three, there should be a little bit more open regulation on how migrant workers are supposed to be treated. There should be maximum working hours, overtime. So first off, the government must recognize that these are human beings, and they have to be treated with dignity, and they have to be given rights equal to a Malaysian worker. And I think the other issue is that the governments of countries which are sending labourers or workers to Malaysia, India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Philippines, they should all get together and get some basic policies in place so that their citizens are not exploited in Malaysia. So it's also surprising if you go to Japan, for instance. It's a thriving economy. There's hardly any migrant workers in Japan. So there's something inherently wrong in Malaysia that we have to rely on so much of migrant workers. Either we are not willing to pay more wages. Number two, in a very exploitive society where we want low wages and high profits. And generally we have a disproportionate amount of migrant workers in Malaysia. So it has to be, if they're coming in, then there has to be control, regulation, and ensure that there's no exploitation. That's very important. When you talk about the ASEAN community, it's only in relation to business. There is no movement of workers. There should be a charter of rights of workers. If you are not looking at giving citizenship, that's fine. There should be some form of work arrangement, training arrangement. A young lawyer from Thailand, for instance, wants to come and do some form of attachment in Malaysia, we should be open. That's one. And secondly, if we do have some form of training, vocation, or whatever it is, Malaysians should be allowed to go to Singapore, for instance, or Brunei, or whatever it is, and from those countries can come here as well. We need to look at opening our borders to allow an easier flow of workers.
Migrant workers generally enter into employment contracts with their employers. This means that in the event of a dispute, migrant workers should be able to rely on the terms agreed upon in their contracts. In practice, however, this plays out very differently.
Breach of contract with the employer, you're suing the employer will revoke your visa. So when your visa is revoked, essentially you are at the mercy of the immigration department. They may give you a right to stay, but they will not allow you to work, number one. If they give you a right to stay, how are you going to sustain yourself? If they don't give you a right to stay, that means you have no way to, once you go back, your claim is 5, 6, 10,000 ringgit. You can't be coming and going and 5, 6 times for your court case to complete. There's really difficult issues relating to enforcement and hugely corrupt practices being carried out, and there's nothing anyone is doing to resolve this. And there's also lots of cases of migrant workers being brought into the country to work in, say, in a factory and then end up in a plantation, for instance. And a lot of documented evidence of exploitation where they're not paid. Then after 6 months or 7 months, the visa is revoked and they send back to India or Bangladesh or whatever it is. So there's no recourse for them to sue their employer. And when they sue their employer, it takes maybe 6 months, 1 year to resolve the case. In between, how are they going to survive in Malaysia? So it's a conundrum that has to be resolved, because how do you protect these people, is it? And we forget one thing. We talk about Asian society, we talk about highly Asian culture, but when it comes to treatment of fellow human beings, we are one of the worst in the world. We have no protection for someone who is helpless. We have no protection for migrant workers. Undocumented migrant workers, they're paid so badly and there's so much exploitation, there's not enough laws to protect them, and nobody's interested in their plight. Because number one, they don't vote in this country and they don't carry a voice per se, so nobody cares. And the embassies or high commissions are not interested at all. So unless an American is arrested, you can immediately see an attaché or someone who run to the prison and things like that, but not from Bangladesh or Pakistan or India or Sri Lanka. I think inherently we are Malaysians per se, we are quite racist in the sense that we look down on Bangladeshis, we look down on the Indonesians, and in fact we are the same stock, yet even same religion, for instance, but yet it is seen as, they're second class, they don't need to be treated equally. And we talk about medical access to hospitals. There's this huge issue about why should we have migrant workers using government hospitals. They're the poorest lot. They are contributing to the Malaysian economy. They should be the ones who should be given access as well. And equality, in the federal constitution talks about equality for all. It doesn't say the equality only for Malaysian citizens. If for anyone in this country, they should all be treated equally. There shouldn't be any distinction between a Malaysian or non-Malaysian or Indian or Bangladeshi or Pakistani. And generally you find that these people are behind the scene. You don't see them. They do a lot of work in Malaysia. You go to a restaurant, you go to a shop, you go to Petaling Street, everywhere they're working. Security guard. These are jobs that Malaysians don't want to do, and we want to exploit the economy in the sense that we don't want to pay high wages. So no Malaysian is willing to work. You get migrant workers come in. The least we can do is treat them with dignity.
Labour migration does not need to be dangerous, degrading, dirty, or difficult. This is an issue that pervades and involves all layers of society. Governments, businesses, enforcement institutions, employers, and workers. In one way or another, we all come into contact with migrant workers and directly or indirectly benefit from labour migration. Upholding dignity and respect is crucial in all laws and policies surrounding labour migration. Decent treatment of migrant workers is not a far-fetched notion. There is no denying that political will plays a central role. Nonetheless, as responsible citizens of our nations, regions, and the world, we can do our part in treating each other well and remembering that at the end of the day, we are all human beings.